Welcome to KR Studio. Today, we will continue with episode 3 of the story, SS class martial artist reborn as a child after 100 years, protecting his clan from destruction. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to support us. Let's dive into the next part now. Enjoy the journey with us. Episode 3 begins. But, Unjiam lowered his head and looked at the kid walking next to him. He seems pretty fierce. People placed in new environments tend to be meek. It is normal to get scared when in an unfamiliar place like Mount Hua. This is especially true for someone at such a young age, but he couldn't find that in this child. The fast walk showed the kid's annoyance, not fear. Unjiam looked at him with strange eyes. When Chung Myung suddenly asked, "When did that place called the White Plum Blossom Boarding House come into existence?" "What are you curious about?" "I heard that teaching is done by taking a disciple under a master, as well as lodging with them during the process." It was a little strange to see everyone gathered at one place. Ungiam frowned at the comment. He is stabbing at a sore spot. Traditionally, what the child said was right. A newly introduced child would be taken under a master, and that man would instruct the disciple about Mount Hua. That is why Mount Hua was known to be the most dignified sect. The reason this teaching method was broken was because of the decline of Mount Hua. Nothing much. We just thought it would be more efficient. Then does teacher also stay back in the White Plum Blossom boarding house? No. Chung Myung nodded his head, at which Unjiam frowned. A strange kid. Such an answer wouldn't satisfy the curiosity of a kid. However, this one nodded his head as if he understood no, more like he didn't care. And Ungeam wasn't sure what the kid was thinking. Basically, everyone who enters Mount Hua is sent to the same dorms. In other words, it was to make the newcomers be aware of Mount Hua's teachings under Ungeam, who handled them. He had seen quite an array of children, but never such a strange kid. What should he do? He couldn't just explain the sob story to a kid, right? An interesting kid seems to have come in. While Ungeam was slowly analyzing him, Chung Myung had different thoughts. They ran away. He could barely comprehend this situation. Looking around at the entire Mount Hua, he could see at a glance how absurd the situation of this place was, considering how he should have left behind at least 3 disciples during his time. If even only 3 people stayed back, Mount Hua wouldn't have turned into this. This means many people abandoned Mount Hua. The number of people couldn't have decreased in an instant, but it was a sinking ship, and once one person walks out, the others would soon follow. Assuming it is okay for those masters who didn't have any disciples, they are responsible for to leave. What could the disciples with nowhere to go do if their masters, who were supposed to teach them, leave the sect? There was a limit to what another master could handle. As a result, a situation would come out where there aren't nearly enough people to teach. Chung Myung lost his appetite. What to do? The current situation is nothing to criticize. Chung Myung was a pragmatist in the past, and unlike now, he had been quite closed off. Delivering results was more important than sticking to tradition. If these people made Mount Hua survive by creating the new dorms, then it was overall a good thing. He felt a bit bitter, but the hearts of the children who had to make up the new dorms must have been torn. It was depressing as he could guess exactly how they had felt. No, I don't have the time to think like this. Enough of being depressed for others. What Chung Myung had to do was to not be swayed by emotions, but to remake Mount Hua the same great place it had been in the past. 3 halls unfolded in front of him. A high pedestal at the top of the large vacant lot and small kids taking their place. Huh? Chung Myung titled his head. The number of disciples was much lower than expected. Compared to the past where the ground was filled, only a handful of them were here. Sword? Taha! With the command, the swords were used and pointed ahead. Oh? Chung Myung, who looked at it, wondered. Mount Hua was a liberal sect. Although it had been criticized for having a strong secular nature, they didn't follow the martial teachings blindly. It was because they didn't like considering the martial arts to be something to force and discipline the kids. Thanks to that, the training hall was never actually full of disciples. Yet, it was constantly overflowing with willed people. This is interesting. It was certainly interesting to see more than 100 people learning the same swordsmanship. Even Chung Myung had never gone through such type of training, except for the time when Sahyung would teach the 7-star sword technique. To the back! Slash! The sounds of 100 swords moving at once. Seeing that, Chung Myung exclaimed, "Wow! Isn't it nice?" Eun asked with a smile. No need to be shocked. If you practice hard, you will soon become like them. Yes. Chung Myung's answer was rather bland, considering how he exclaimed a moment back. Of course, Chung Myung's comment had a different meaning than Eun assumed. What are they doing? The further the training progressed, the more his eyes narrowed. Ahead! The children took a step ahead and then stabbed. It wasn't swordsmanship which kids should be taught. That? Huh? What kind of sword technique is it? What do you mean? Ah, the swordsmanship. Eun, who understood the question, nodded his head and answered. The swordsmanship which they are practicing now is the equilibrium sword. Equilibrium sword? Yes, to be precise, it is called Equilibrium of 6 sword. A sword technique which was handed down from Manhwa's strongest swordsmanship masters. It is the sword technique which is the basis of everything. It might not be easy to learn, but if you put in effort, you will surely see results. Make sure you go and stand at the back. It will be awkward for your first time, but think of it as a learning and observation period. Detailed instructions will be done within a week. Chung Myung walked to the back with a dull face. He must have been frightened. Seeing that, Eun frowned. Kids have no ambition these days. Right? He glanced at the kid again. It was strange that the kid didn't seem frightened by holding a real sword. Even fearless kids would tremble a little when they see themselves holding a real sword. However, Eun thought that it would be better to not expect too much from this child. Meanwhile, Chung Myung, who was standing at the back, had a completely different line of thoughts. What the hell are these crazy people even doing? Practical? Learning this? Sigh, this is knee-deep shit. This was an introduction to martial arts? Introduction is meant to give the basics to the kids who were nothing more than blank sheets of paper. What would happen if they decided to teach some children 3,000 characters instead of basic alphabets? Sure, the kids would be able to know the characters by heart, but would they be able to understand the meaning behind them? Of course not. This was going to ruin the kids. What good will this do? These people were in a hurry, so they used this shortcut method. But this was too ridiculous. What these kids were doing wasn't that great. But it's plausible enough to teach, eh? Chung Myung said his thoughts out loud, making all of them turn and look at him. Chung Myung, who noticed it, quickly shook his head, yet all the kids still looked at him suspiciously. At that moment, the great disciple standing on the podium shouted, "During training, why are your eyes looking elsewhere? So sorry. Look ahead, kids. Shit! Ugh!" Children made sick noises and took their stances back up, placing their swords into pose again. Seeing that Chung Myung clicked his tongue, it was then that the great disciple looked at Chung Myung. "You? Yes? Why aren't you doing it? Because I don't know?" The great disciple rolled his eyes and nodded his head, focusing his attention back on the group of children. "Continue, back!" And the command fell. Chung Myung looked up at the sky as he watched all this. The sky was blue, clear without a single cloud. It was like seeing the future of Mount Hua, nothing. How can I change this? He had a deep and long future ahead, where he will have to travel an incredibly rough road. A path only exacerbated by the fact he is alone. Such was also the future of Mount Hua. No money, no people. The martial arts is a mess. Changing Mount Hua is more troubling than anything. Sigh, it was then that a sharp voice rang. "Hey? Huh? New here?" To instantly recognize a new member, how weak was the current sect? "So, I'll see you later. Don't you leave." Chun Myung lost his appetite for the second time. "Okay, but let me ask you one thing. Have you lost it? Don't you understand what I am hinting at here?" "Fine. Just answer me and I'll do whatever you want. What is it? What else are you learning here besides this? This, equilibrium of 6 or something. After learning this, it will be the 7 Sages' sword. After that, we will graduate from the White Plum Blossom and learn the Lesser Qing sword technique." "Qing sword?" "Yes. After that, we will be able to learn the Tai Flummox sword technique." "Tai Flummox sword technique?" "Right, Tai Flummox." Chung Myung was shocked. No, it couldn't be. No way. "Hey, one more question." "What?" What happened to the 24 movement plum blossom sword technique? What is that? The 24 movement plum blossom sword technique? It's a technique of Manhwa. The child frowned as he responded. What is that? Manhwa doesn't have that sword technique. Huh? It's my first time hearing about it. Ugh, it was strange. No technique called the 24 movement plum blossom sword? And people need to learn this one? Chung Myung's eyes were blooming. Leader, this Tai Flamox sword is too weak in power. At this point, I don't think removing it entirely from our teachings would even cause any rift. What do you think? It is a sword technique that cannot be used. Let's just let it go. Still, the ancestors left it behind for... Are we going to teach the kids a technique which they wouldn't use and is a complete waste of their time? You're right. Let's throw it away. Sa-hyung, these kids were learning that. Manhwa is bound to die if it continues like this. Looks like it would fall before he could even have the chance to rebuild it. Who is talking again? You people. Come out here right now. Sit. I'll see you later. I mean it. A huge vein sprang up on Chung Myung's forehead. Dying is better. Dying is better. Chung Myung's face as he returned to the dorms was completely rotten. Nothing was going right. People said that even if a rich man failed, he'd live 3 years in luxury. Judging from the current situation, it seemed like 100 years was too far-fetched. There was no way the Manhwa sect was any better than some third-rate sect. No, even a third-rate sect would do better. This sect has no money, and the children are in poor condition. If that wasn't bad enough, they are full of shitty philosophy that no one understands. Every other place would be fine. Just this, and that too. Where did you throw away the 24 plum blossom swords, you bastards? He could understand prioritizing one technique over another because of the difficulties of the sect or teaching abilities of the remaining instructors. But making a technique totally disappear is a whole different thing. Even given the fact that the previous generation was annihilated, they had left money and history behind. Chung Myung scratched his head. Where should I even start? The term total chaos would be used in such cases. Sa-hyung, can I even save Manhwa? When he lifted his head and looked up, it seemed like that old man was smiling down. Save? Chung Myung grabbed a handful of soil and threw it to the sky, and went back to his dorms. Ow, my waist, he said as his back hurt. Just because they talked a little during the training, that man made them train extra. If only Chung Myung was as strong as his previous life, he could go back and forth from the summit to the base of Manhwa with minimal effort. I need to hurry. Chung Myung lost his appetite. At first, he was going to try and figure out how Manhwa worked and think about fixing it. But the more he found out, the more troubled he felt. It would have been easier if Chung Myung had passed on to the current time with his past body in mind. However, right now, Chung Myung was nothing more than the youngest disciple, a beggar nonetheless, which meant the lowest level. Could he change the position of Manhwa? Sigh. He could help let out a sigh while thinking. Of course, he could take his time and slowly change it. However, the problem was that Chung Myung wasn't the laid-back kind. The more he saw the current Manhwa, the more rushed he felt. Even the Wudang sect must be developing at this moment. In general, martial arts focus on practice and repetition. However, Chung Myung had a different idea. The world is continuously evolving. No matter how many people in the past were geniuses, if they continue to study, even the new generations will turn into geniuses. In the end, they are bound to surpass the realm of those ancient geniuses. In other words, it means that martial arts would eventually develop with the passage of time. Just because they were Shaolin, if they didn't constantly try to enhance their existing martial arts, that sect wouldn't be so flourishing now. Over the years, numerous more people will come up and fill the gaps of martial arts. Right? Progress. Other people are making progress at this time, and these ones are forgetting what they have. How could he not be upset? Chung Myung took a deep breath. For now, gulp. Chung Myung looked down at his stomach. Ch! Because he had been living as a beggar for so long, he couldn't properly develop his body. I couldn't eat dinner. After all the others finished training, he wanted to eat, but Chung Myung was punished so he couldn't eat. In the past and now, there was nothing he hated more than fasting. Things turned more difficult and annoying when he was hungry. Chung Myung grabbed his stomach as he entered the dorms. First of all, he had to organize some things. Yeah, he is here. Upon entering, Chung Myung raised his eyes slightly towards those who appeared. Dozens of disciples of the third great disciple were in the room. Yeah, newbie! The gaze of powerless Chung Myung went towards them. Seeing their faces, it didn't look like they were waiting with any good intentions. Chung Myung took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and said to Agul, "What?" Agul's face heated up in an instant. "This bastard must be crazy. Call me Jogul Sayong." Sayong? Chung Myung looked at the ceiling. Looking at the old ceiling and wooden buildings, he wanted to cry. Now he was in a position where he had to refer to these little jerks as Sayongs. But what could he do? He should have done something earlier if he didn't like that. Yes, Jogul Sayong. What is it? If you are new, you should report. Huh? Don't worry, it won't be too bad. You look too weak. I am afraid that you'd die if I hit you a bit hard. Laughter erupted from the sides. Everyone seemed to enjoy the joke. Well, he understood the situation. This is the essence of what dorm lives are. Through these types of situations, the bonds between the people grow stronger and they learn and connect with each other. Almost everyone giggled. Nevertheless, it doesn't feel nice. He wasn't dissatisfied with this, but what he hated was the attitude of these people, acting like it was their own gang. Of course, when Chung Myung first entered Manhwa, it was similar, but at least they didn't act like these kids. Huh? What was this old man saying? Well, he was over 80 years old. Report. Chung Myung nodded his head. First of all, it will be important to handle these people. His stomach hurts, but what could he do? He was here to save Mount Hua, right? What can I do? Great Sayong. Jogul said as he smiled. Yes, Great Sayong. Chung Myung turned his head and saw the one called Great Sayong. One span bigger than the Jogul and definitely older. This guy was another person under the third great disciple. I'll do this. Yes. In Chung Myung's head, the current order of people flashed in an instant. That guy is higher, but Jogul takes the lead. It was the same in his time. Although Sayong would always help clear the problems for the sect leader. If so, then this situation, take it off. Huh? Chung Myung's head tilted. Did he hear something wrong? I said take it off. Chung Myung looked around. He looked at the kids inside. Everyone was looking at him as if they were having fun. Chung Myung's gaze turned to Jogul. I feel like I misunderstood. No, I think so. Chung Myung tried to smile. Don't get mad. Let's not get angry. If he got angry, he would be the same as these kids. To take it off? Yes, Jogul smirked. That is how we normally get to know each other. Come on. Take it off, dance, and get beaten, because that is how we show our love to the new ones. Jogul's lips turned into a smile. Now. Huh? Feel shy. His pronunciation wasn't right. Chung Myung, who coughed up then, tried to speak. Then, Sasuk Ungium? He'll be practicing for the evening. You better throw away the thought of him coming to help you. Right now, we're the only ones here. I see. Chung Myung nodded his head. And even if he was here, you would be fine for today. But you'll have to live here from now on, so do you really think you'd be able to escape? Right. This was where he will be living. Thanks. His thinking had been a bit wrong until now. Then there are no other dorms here? This bastard just keeps talking. I can't hold back anymore. Let's get right to it. Jogul jumped up from his seat and grabbed Chung Myung by the collar. Once you get the hang of it, you'll respect me as the Sayong. I'm not doing this because I hate you. We're using this to love and put you on the right path. Get it? Sayong. What? Anything left to say? Clench your teeth. Huh? At that moment, Chung Myung's fist hit Jogul's lower jaw. Bang! With the sound of something exploding. Jogul's body soared to the ceiling. Crack! And he broke through the old ceiling. Crack! Jogul's body, which was nailed into the ceiling, shook. Everything turned quiet. The eyes of the other disciples went wide. Chung Myung took a glimpse at Jogul, then turned and walked towards the door. Where are you going? Clank! Chung Myung raised the latch and locked the door, and as he turned with a bright smile on his face. As long as a person lives, they worry about this and that. And among them, I think about one thing the most. But, crack! Crack! Loosening his head, he continued. Thanks to you, my thinking has turned very simple. Right, I need to start with organizing my surroundings. Chung Myung raised his leg and stepped on the chair next to him and shattered it. Grabbing the broken leg of the chair, he smiled. and he went up to one of them. I grew up growing in my own way, so would I have the manners to treat my seniors rightly? A small hope bloomed in their hearts. He had called them seniors. Seniors? Since you are seniors, I will trouble you. Don't scream out loud. Any screaming bastard will receive double the dose. Ah, they were the seniors. Come on, get hit and done with it. Sahyung bastards! Chung Myung, as if possessed, attacked the disciples. Sahyung. Yes, Sajay. Do it harder. Yes, I will do my best. The strength in the hands which were massaging the shoulder increased. What's your name? It is Yoon Jong. And you are the great Sahyung? Yes, that's right. Chung Myung slightly turned his head as Yoon Jong's swollen face came into his view. Still, since you are the great Sahyung, I will treat you well. Thank you. Keep pressing. Yes. Yoon Jong returned to rubbing as Chung Myung turned his head back. The other Sahyungs were all on the floor with their heads bowed to the ground. You all? When Chung Myung opened his mouth, everyone flinched. It was a strange sight to see kids above his age trembling on the floor. Shouldn't you be helping out and living a quiet life? Shouldn't you? Sahyungs? Yes, we were short-sighted. Chung Myung sighed at those words. Who was Chung Myung? He was one of the 3 great swordsmen and was recognized to be of the highest level among the 3, except for Chunma. Wouldn't he be able to easily handle these people? No matter how weak he had become, these people were little kids, and Chung Myung could easily handle 30 of these kids. Since this was your way of accepting me, I will let this go this time. But from now on, such things should happen in a humane way. There are things which can and cannot be done. Everyone groaned without answering. Why am I like this? One of them thought, it feels like a Sasak is yelling at me. It didn't feel like they were on the same level as Chung Myung, as if they weren't his peers. Chung Myung clicked his tongue. I need to deal with them. The more he thought about it, the more ridiculous the situation felt. Attention. As soon the word rang out, the kids got up. No matter how bad Mount Hua's current state is, the kids of the most disciplined Mount Hua shouldn't be like this. Chung Myung clicked his tongue. You need to get back to the sect's initial state. The children exchanged glances. I don't get it. How did this worm crawl in? Who was the bastard who claimed that this kid was a loser? We're ruined. Now we all have to live together. Now they were staying together in a dorm. If only they could live with their masters like the old tradition, they could have escaped from Chung Myung. But now they were all living in a single dorm. It was like a wild tiger was thrown into a cage of rabbits. Shh! Chung Myung opened his eyes. Remember, yes. Now, who in here is the most aware about the situation of Mount Hua? Hands up! No one said anything, but all their gazes turned to one side. Seeing the gazes of the others directed towards him, Jo Gul's eyes widened. Hand. Raise your hand. Jo Gul's hand moved upwards. I'll see you later, you bastards. It's been many years that they had been living together. How could they sell out their own? Did they have no conscience? Jo Gul gritted his teeth and stepped forward. With a stiff head, he looked at Chung Myung. Sahyung Jo Gul. Yes. Even if you are a Sahyung, aren't you being too stiff with me? Not at all. Jo Gul hurried and touched his neck. My neck felt too stiff, so I couldn't move it like usual. Chung clicked his tongue and got up. Follow me to this room. Yes. The others can rest for today. We'll do what we need to tomorrow. Yes. Sahyung, follow me. As Chung Myung moved his hand, Jo Gul followed him like a cow being led to the slaughterhouse. As soon as the two disappeared, the remaining disciples rushed to Yoon Jong. Great Sahyung, are you fine? Do I look fine? No. Yoon Jong caressed his swollen eyes. The sad thing was that his swollen eyes would be fine by tomorrow, so he couldn't even complain. If only Sasuk was in these dorms, he could have stopped it. With his pride, he couldn't go to the man and show him the wounds, and by tomorrow morning, everyone would be healed with no traces of the abuse suffered today. In other words, he planned this beforehand, and as he hit us. The more he thought about it, the more terrifying the new kid became in his mind. Now what do we do? Do what? Should we attack him once he goes to bed? Will you do it? He retorted. Everyone went silent at that question. The image of Chung Myung running wild like a tiger roamed in their minds. No, we shouldn't do that. We'll die if it goes wrong. Yoon Jong shook his head. The image of Chung Myung made his mouth turn dry. But someone who was lost in thought asked, Why was Jogul taken away? Sit comfortably. I will stand here. Don't worry and sit. I won't hit you. It wasn't because of that. Jogul hesitated and opened his mouth. I can't seem to bend my back after being hanged from the ceiling, so standing is fine. Chung Myung coughed. So? Why did you call me? Talk comfortably, Sayoung. Yes? It is strange to see Sayoung talk so respectfully, so speak comfortably. Yes. Speaking comfortably? Yes. Chung Myung gave up. Well, as long as they live, one day the kid would open up. So why did you call me? I have a few questions for you. First, I'd like you to answer in as much detail as you can. Okay. Chung Myung opened his mouth. So, are the children here mostly from merchant families? Yes. Chung Myung tapped his chin with his finger. Merchants. In the past, there were many children of merchants who wanted to enter Manhwa. However, Manhwa never accepted anyone from merchant families as disciples. Was it because merchants were bad? Of course not. They could accept beggars into the sect. A merchant wasn't a huge deal. The problem was that the children of merchants didn't come to become disciples. They came only to learn the martial arts of Manhwa. In the case of descendants of Manhwa, they would come here with the intention of burning the teachings of Manhwa into their bones. After initiation, training, and receiving guidance, one of them would become the leader of Manhwa and lead the sect. However, those who enter from merchant families remain solely as disciples of the sect and learn only the martial arts, after which they return back to their families. Even out in the world, they would be respected for being a disciple of Manhwa, but it was nothing compared to those who stayed back. The disciples who sunk down the teaching of the sect into their lives were always of support, and they would protect Manhwa. Most of them leave, which meant even the 3 great disciples who were teaching today would eventually leave Manhwa. What is this situation? If the number of disciples decreased in Manhwa, then its name and reputation would in turn decrease. But Sahyungs are here. What do you mean? Well, there should have been rumors going around. You should have known that Manhwa isn't in a good shape. Why come all the way here? That. Jogul scratched his head. Actually, my father originally didn't like the idea of sending me to Manhwa. However, there weren't many sects which would accept me. Although Manhwa has collapsed, it is still one of the many sects in the world. The connections which come from this would give me great strength and freedom. According to Jogul, the kids of the merchants who came in here were common. It wasn't bad. Ultimately, it was to make themselves be valued. If they had money or talent, there was no way kids like Jogul would enter Manhwa. They would have gone to other better sects. Which means even the past disciples of Manhwa don't have money, which means everyone around Manhwa is in a mess too. His bones felt sore. It reminded him of the old days, with his Sayoung holding up a book and tying up his hair. At that time, he was obsessed with making money, and Sayoung was a mastermind in gathering it. Thinking back, Manhwa could have come out of the situation if they had those ledgers that Sayoung had. People need money to live. Just because one is a martial artist doesn't mean they could live on eating dew. Then, yes. Are you planning to go back to your family after learning martial arts? Normally, yes. Is that why this place looks so sleazy? There was no way anyone could love this place when they came here to fulfill a temporary goal. I get it. Go away now. Then, and yes? When does the morning training start? It starts at 7. Tell everyone to prepare by 5 and gather them in the hall. Yes? 5 a.m. Yes. And have the Sahyungs know what I said. To prepare for tomorrow morning and get them together? What, don't like it? Why would I not like it? Trust me. Yeah, I like that attitude. After a while, Jogul left the room with a subtle expression, but sadly his room was right next to Chung Myung. Hearing the footsteps leaving, Chung Myung laid flat on the bed. Even 1,000 miles start with a single step. He didn't remember who said that in the first place. But the road Chung Myung had to take was 1,000 miles with all kinds of messed up roads. Still, it will start with one step. And that one step would be with these kids. The next day at dawn, Wung, Chung Myung stretched his body. Dantian. His Dantian, which used to be small and feeble, was now in a period of noticeable growth. The energy which accumulated had grown to be clearly recognizable. Wung. With every breath he took, Chungmyung could feel his energy resonate and purify his body. Bright and clean energy. Even Chungmyung was taken aback. Despite having lived for decades, he had never witnessed such a clean and transparent energy before. His dantian was now accumulating this energy. Although the size was limited and wielding enormous strength would be difficult, with time, more power would accrue, and he would be able to reach new heights he had never reached before. How long will it take? After cultivating, Chungmyung's face distorted. In order to reach his former peak and even exceed it, he needed time. Mount Hua was facing its doom now. Would it wait for him to gain power? Chungmyung pushed aside and suppressed his anger as he analyzed the situation. Let's get this straight. The problems in Mount Hua are innumerable. If he had to pick one out, Chungmyung wouldn't be able to decide which was most important. However, there were 3 things he knew: no money, no martial arts, and no talent. So, what is wrong? Any one of these issues was bad enough, but when they were all piled on top of each other, he could feel his stomach curling in on itself. What was the biggest problem? Young talent. Chungmyung simplified it. Money could be earned, and he has a wealth of martial arts knowledge that could be taught naturally. So, where do we get talented youth? Talent wasn't something Chungmyung could influence. He couldn't just go out and kidnap talented kids to save Mount Hua, and finding out who was talented and who wasn't simply by looking at them was impossible. If so, he would have to go for the children of prestigious families. So, I need to make use of them. Chungmyung clenched his fists. What would change even if he blamed himself? He had no choice but to make the best of what was available to him. It was clear that the people here weren't very good, and there was a shortage of teaching staff. But if the people here are deficient, they must be taught, and if they are broken, they must be fixed. Of course, I never took in a disciple. Old memories came to his mind. When he was old enough to accept a disciple, Sahyung asked. Chungmyung? Yes, Sahyung? Now is the time to take in a disciple. How do you plan on teaching your disciples? Do you even need to ask? What do you mean? Spare the rod, spoil the child. Should they make a mistake, they will be beaten. Even dogs will walk on their hind legs if trained to do so. I assume humans can't be too different, right? Let's talk again later. After that, Sahyung never brought up him taking on a disciple again. I never expected to receive so many disciples at once. Chungmyung's lips curled into a smile. If anyone had seen that, they would surely think of it as a wicked smile. I am sleepy. Why do we need to gather at dawn? Great, Sahyung. Isn't this too much? Yoonjong closed his eyes. Just be quiet, will you? You bastards. The rules of Mount Hua are relatively strict, but the children weren't yet forced to give up on worldly affairs. They are children from families that control their own regions, even if they are not from famous families. As a result, they can't stand being inconvenienced and aren't used to being patient. Even though it had only been half a day since they had been beaten, they still let loose with their complaints. Yoonjong lifted his head and looked at Jo Gol. At least Jo Gol kept silent in this situation. Well, it wasn't that the others didn't understand the situation. Despite complaining, everyone did come over here as requested. Yoonjong stared at the dorms. Where did that monster even come from? Chungmyung wielded a broken chair leg with a demon-like appearance, defeating over 30 kids in an instant. Brrr! When he thought about it, chills passed through his body. But who the hell is he? They were words that expressed everyone's feelings. As if I could know. There were more than 30 people. Is it even possible for the seniors to control a crowd like that? I don't know. But what was certain was that even the great disciples wouldn't be able to imitate what that monster did. That kid only joined us yesterday. He must have learned martial arts somewhere else already, right? Anyway, does it make sense to be here without even having anything to eat? Everyone was confused. Even Yoonjong, who was older and lived longest in Mount Hua, couldn't figure it out, but he knew that something was up. Is he going to hit us again? It wasn't known who said it, but everyone went stiff upon hearing those words. Is that possible? It could be that he wants us to remember last night's embarrassment. What if we fail? Worry spread among the crowd. Everyone turned their heads. Jo Gul, who was standing there, spoke. If you all don't want to be hit again, then just stay quiet and follow what he says. Sayang Jogul. Jogul was known to have the best skills among the disciples, and even he was shaking. Crazy. What? Get hit again? Get hit and end up stuck in the ceiling? Jogul was confident in his skills, but even he couldn't compare to this monster despite being called a genius in Mount Hua. In the end, martial arts are something people learn. Even without sufficient teaching and good martial arts, he was confident that he could even stand toe-to-toe with the genius disciples of the most prestigious sects. However, that confidence flew away after just one punch struck his jaw. Then, why were we asked to gather here? The disciples tilted their heads, looking at the strange tools ahead of them. Right, how do you use these? Long wooden rods and then a sturdy pouch, large enough to fit a person's head, filled with something, and why prepare pebbles and sand pouches? Do I look like I know? As everyone was groaning, the door swung open. All the clamoring mouths went silent at once and looked at the person. Chung Myung slowly walked out, but on his face, the annoyance was evident. Why does he look bothered? If you are so bothered, don't gather us like this. Chung Myung stopped and then looked around as he asked, Is everyone here? Yes! Keep quiet or the Sasuks will wake up. Crack, crack. Chung Myung stretched his neck and then said, Well, we are going to be living together for the foreseeable future. Though I don't know how it will turn out, maybe we would even end up spending the rest of our lives together. I will go home, even if that means death. I'll make it down. I'll make it down the mountain at any cost. Even those who had decided to live and die with the Mount Hua sect had second thoughts upon hearing those words. But in my opinion, Chung Myung smiled. You people are too weak. The most insulting and disgraceful word to those who walk the path of martial arts is weak. Even if they were only here from merchant families to build a name for themselves, it was painful to take such an insult to their faces. Shit. The problem was that they couldn't object to it. These were the words of a person who beat 30 people at once without being hit. No one could deny it. Well, even I agree that martial arts aren't everything in life. But you all chose to study and learn as Mount Hua sect members. Then you should aim to be as strong as you can be, right? So, starting from today, you will practice with me every morning. It's nice, right? As if that would be nice. Someone raised their hand when they saw Chung Myung's shameless attitude. What is it? Do we have to do this? Chung Myung looked at the one who asked the question with a bitter gaze and then turned to Yoon Jong. Yoon Jong, who looked at Chung Myung, flinched as he said, It's because not everyone was there at that time. Ah, right. There were people who didn't get hit. Some didn't participate in that bullying. Even if word of what happened had spread, not many would believe that and step back, right? You don't want to then? You seem like a newcomer, so why are you talking all this nonsense? No matter what, you should at least mind your manners. Chung Myung nodded at those words. Yes, a person must be polite. In that sense, those who have no intention of becoming strong or training. Raise your hand. If 100 people gather, there will be at least 1 or 2 who don't care, and as those 1 or 2 hands come up, others will start to raise, roughly a dozen or so. Right. Martial arts aren't everything. Come on, let's go inside. Can we go? Sure. The faces of Jogul and Yoon Jong went pale at those words. You idiots! Let's go is different from you go. They are walking into a hell of their own making. The children, unaware of their situation, smiled brightly and entered the dorms. And Chung Myung followed them with a smile. Tack! The door was neatly closed behind them. No one dared to open their mouths as they looked at the dorm. Contrarily, there were no screams either. But that's... Yoon Jong looked at the dorm. The entire building was swaying slightly, and it was obvious what was happening inside. A short time passed. Keek! The door opened, and from the inside, the kids sprinted out with their might as if they had seen a ghost, and then came over and took their positions. Tsk! Chung Myung, who came out, began to speak once more. Who among you doesn't want to practice? None. Be quiet, others will wake up. None. Good. Chung Myung clapped once and began to move. I, as an instructor, like to make people strong. The future of Mount Hua is bright. I will do everything I can to make you stronger. Now, let's begin. Seeing the sun rising in the distance, Yoon Jong tightly closed his eyes. The future of Mount Hua was bright, but their future seemed bleak. Frowning at the bright light peering through the window, Jaeom reluctantly woke himself from bed. These brats. The laws of Mount Hua were strict. In the past, when the students would share their teacher's residence, the disciple was bound to rise earlier and wake up their teacher, then prepare breakfast for him. Although the times had changed and such doctrines had fallen from standards. Nonetheless, it was customary for a disciple to come, wake them, and greet them. But today, no one came. These kids, let them go for a while, and they turn lazy. Jaeom frowned as he got up. If any of the disciples were awake, they should have come to wake him up. That means that all the kids inside the White Plum Blossom dorms were still asleep. No, just because they didn't come to wake him up doesn't mean that they must be sleeping. Come to think of it, he remembered a new child joining the dormitory yesterday. Are those brats doing it again? He already knew that these young disciples of his would put new recruits through some form of hazing, and that they were hell-bent on seeing it through. As a teacher, he felt that he should put an end to it, but Eungeum was conflicted, as he also believed it helped them bond together. Jo-gul might take it too far, but knowing that Yoonjong was there, he was confident that no problems would arise. However, the fact that no one came over to greet and wake him meant that things had gone sour yesterday. Eungeum furrowed his brows as he quickly changed his clothes. Putting on his robe and sword at the waist, he went out. First, I'll have to check. Determined, he took long strides towards the White Plum Blossom boarding house. Thinking that he would have to wake the kids with a huge scare, it happened the moment he turned the corner. Go? Out? Eungeum, who was about to yell, took a deep breath and choked back his words. His eyes widened at what he saw. What is this? He rubbed his eyes in disbelief at the strange sight unfolding before him. What? Am I in hell? Such a strange thought briefly flashed through his mind before he came back to his senses. This is Mount Hua. The scene unfolding in front of him was happening in Mount Hua, but he couldn't understand why this was happening. Had he gone delirious, or was he looking at something wrong? Eungeum, who found himself rubbing his eyes once more to clear his sight, looked at what was happening again. However, nothing changed. Ah! A despairing chorus echoed within his ears as Eungeum stifled back a groan, unsure of how to react. Ah! Ah! I'm going to die! Mother! Take me home! Eungeum stared blankly at the kids who were moaning pitifully. Were these the same young disciples he knew? Although their ignorance would sometimes cause anger and their wickedness would lead to disappointment, the children he knew were still innocent kids. He always felt warmth from them. But from the kids right now in front of him, there was no warmth of life. Who are these ragged kids? Were these the kids he knew? No matter what he thought, these kids looked like worn-out beggars. Eungeum peered around. Kua. I am done. I am really going to die. Eungeum looked at the faces of the kids who were sprawled across the area. Are these my disciples? A little rough. No, their condition was horrible, but those lying around in a beggar-like state were indeed his disciples. What have they done? Why were the kids who were so soft yesterday in such a dire condition? Wooden swords and strange pouches lay scattered around the ragged children. Eungeum knew what he had to do. There was a limit to what his mind could guess, and what's more, there were more than 100 mouths here that could answer his questions. What the hell has happened here? As soon as he asked, the kids, who were lying on the floor groaning, looked at him. The eyes of the half-dead disciples came to life. Sasuk! Lord Sasuk! Oh, heavenly Lord! They all were speaking strangely, but it was clear that these kids were welcoming him warmly. They were even shedding tears. It was unusual for him, whose mission was keeping the youth controlled, to see them greet him with such enthusiasm. No, it wasn't uncommon, but this was his first time it seemed so genuine and heartfelt. Cough, Sasuk! Why are you here so late? Why? I missed Sasuk so much. What were they saying? Strangely, every corner of his heart was proud looking at these kids who were always ignorant, welcoming him so fiercely. An unknown emotion flooded in. But Eungeum soon shook his head and collected his thoughts. And no, it wasn't the time for him to be impressed like this. Upon examining the youth before him, it seemed like they had fought some fierce battle. They were battered in dirt and sweat. Eungeum's heart ached as he saw their pitifully trembling limbs and desired the truth of the situation. Just what happened here? The children, who looked like they were about to cry, hesitated and didn't say anything when the question came, just a glance to the back. Are they concerned about speaking up? Eunjeom's gaze followed their line of sight. There was another kid who was working hard. Jo-gul? No. The other one. Other. From Jo-gul, he looked even further back. He is? Eunjeom's eyes seemed to widen beyond their limits at what he saw. The new kid? What was his name? Chungmyeong? What is he doing? Eunjeom tilted his head. Chungmyeong was doing something bizarre. He had a wooden rod on his shoulder with several large pouches hanging from either side. What is in those pouches? Those are dirt bags. Why dirt bags? He asked despite knowing why. Weights. Among the unrivaled ancestors, there were people who would do this. Gasp! Eunjeom, who was watching, could tell that the kid's body was getting stronger. Despite trembling as if he would collapse at any moment, he stands up, shaking until he regains balance, and squats again. Tuck, tuck! Beads of sweat poured down his chin. His whole body was drenched in sweat. Will he die like this? Eungeum worried about his condition as he watched the child's face, which turned a blazing red with veins popping, and his expression twisted like a devil freshly escaped from hell. There was no word more fitting than difficult. To describe this kid, Chungmyeong, as he groaned and continued to work out despite the apparent pressure he felt. You'll die like that, you brat. Eunjeom wasn't a generous man. In fact, he firmly believed the more rigorous the training, the better the results. Like a blacksmith hammers a sword to remove impurities, diamonds can only emerge from coal under pressure. This mindset allows him to push his disciples and strengthen their will alongside their bodies. However, even he would say that the training of Chungmyeong was harsh beyond the limits. Wait, then the reason why these kids are here? Was it because they were training together? Sasak! Save me! We will die this way! The children's bodies were drenched in sweat. The clothes they had on were soaked through and dripping with water. It gave Eunjeom goosebumps to think that this was all sweat. Then they weren't sleeping? Did that mean the kids were training since dawn? When did you begin training? Since 5. Have they been doing this for over an hour? Why? A simple question, yet no one answered it. We'll die if we tell you. Everyone present was making a desperate face. No way? No, it couldn't be. As if that could happen. Does that even make sense? The kids there were the disciples of Manhwa. Even if the sect wasn't what it used to be, they still practiced martial arts. Among them, some kids have been here for more than 5 years. Did that mean the young disciples were suffering here like this because they couldn't handle the little new kid? Wait, Jo-gul was known for his outstanding skills among the children, yet even he was on the ground struggling to catch his breath. What about Eunjeong? He quickly scanned the area looking for Eunjeong. Oh my! Eunjeong was on the floor. Why is he like that? Jo-gul was fine, but Eunjeong looked as though his soul had escaped his body. Eunjeong was gasping for air with his face on the ground and hips slightly raised, and tears could be seen forming in the corners of his eyes as he struggled on the ground. That? Eungeum opened his mouth and shut it again. No, training is good, but wasn't it clear what happened? The kids must have woken up early to do strength training. Although Manhwa is a sect that focuses on speed and finesse, basic strength training is also taught. All martial arts begin with the body as a foundation. But what the hell does it mean that only 1 hour of training made everyone like this? Eungeum wiped the cold sweat from his brow. When he glanced back, the kids were all looking at him with dazzling eyes, all with the hope that this man would solve the situation. Don't look at me with those eyes. It was seriously embarrassing. Kuah. Eunjeom coughed as he changed his mind and looked at Chungmyeong. First, he had to figure out what was happening. He would determine how to react once he knew the situation. Bring that kid. At that moment, Eunjeom had firmly imprinted the name Chungmyeong into his mind. Eunjeom had no idea that this would be the most important name he would learn in this life. That's the end of episode 3. Thank you all for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me.